Last Man Home. I sprayed a mouthful of beer all over Teddy and Gris when the bug stepped into the Wildlife Tavern. I wasn't alone. Rows of grizzled backwoodsmen wore their neighbors' drinks as the first Alotan they'd ever seen lumbered back to our table. Things like that just didn't happen in Ladysmith, Quebec. Population 1,400. Surprises weren't much fun for me after the war. That's why I moved to a leaky old cottage a long walk down the road from the middle of nowhere. Ladysmith, Quebec, population 1,400. The big surprise out there was when the electricity didn't go out in rough weather, which made the blue bastard standing in front of me one mother of a surprise. I never wanted to see one of its kind again. Combat reflexes are hard to shake, especially the ones wired aftermarket into your body. I fought mine down, but when Teddy caught sight of his first bad guy since peace broke out, he went green, and his venom sacs puffed up painful fast. Meanwhile, Gris bobbed his smooth, egg-shaped head and kept on talking. "I'm just saying he's late, again." The Shelev put his tiny, four-fingered hand on my arm, mistaking my beer geyser as a response to his bad-mouthing of our friend. "Jake, I don't care if Drew is between jobs, or if he's got to stand in line to get on a starship. I told him I'd fly him in, first class." Gris's blinking slowed to human pace when I didn't answer, then went glacial when he took stock of Teddy's darkening complexion. He followed our eyes to the bug, and froze. I could feel his hand warm up as extra blood pumped through him, another wartime souvenir at work. Suddenly, I was real glad Drew was late for the reunion. I don't spend much time talking about the war. Oh, I remember most of it. It's not like some vets who joke that their implants were scooped out with a melon baller. And I love the reunions with Teddy and Gris and Drew. You just won't catch me swapping stories over beer. It was our sixth get-together since the war, always in Ladysmith. The guys knew I didn't like to travel, especially off-world. And always on the same day we'd agreed to back in the trenches. What with operations to yank or neuter our implants, and the reintegration classes we had to pass before returning to civilian life, we missed the first year. Maybe that was a good thing, because by the second year, we were all hell-bent on keeping up with each other. It meant a lot, sharing the same table every year with the only other soldiers that had served under Lieutenant Callahan and survived. I could have done without the bug showing up, though. It was young. You can tell their age by the length of the spikes. I let the programming that slowed my breathing and snapped things into focus do its thing, but I wasn't sure how long that would last, so I did what any jarhead would do. I emptied my beer in one slug and got my feet under me in case I needed them. I'd forgotten how thick a Alotan exoskeleton was. Then again, I'd never been this close to it before. As much as I hated the war, right then I sure missed those big, beautiful guns we used to carry. Thinking of which, I flicked my eyes behind the bar and saw the tavern's owner, pale with fear, reach slowly under the counter. I shook my head, once. Eddie turned even whiter, but I was the only human he'd ever met that fought in the war, so the short wood handle of his sawed-off shotgun disappeared again. Pretty soon, the hurtin' song on the old DVD jukebox in the corner was the only sound in the room. Gris literally hadn't moved. Some Shelev biology the military hadn't beat, though his army mods would get the blood flowing a lot faster than was natural. His skin was turning rock hard, too, and pumping out toxin that warded off predators on his homeworld. Smelled like the worst skunk you ever caught a whiff of in your life. The instinct to hide grabbed Kaiben like Teddy when nasties came around. His glass was on the table now, and both tails were coiling on the floor. His skin, nails, and eyeball were slime green, heading darker, and he'd slunk halfway out of his chair when I nudged him with my foot. He swiveled one eye my way, while the other three kept an eye on Big Blue. "You're in a crap brown-colored bar, with straw on the floor, Teddy. Going green won't help much." Ah, there were the old soldier guts I remembered. I wondered if they were something government had hardwired into me and forgot to take out. I also wondered why they'd had to put back my fear of heights, which made re-roofing the cottage a real bitch. Teddy didn't speak, but I could see his color start to fade as his wits came back. So we were cool, mostly. 3 ex-soldiers facing a 7-foot-tall monster from the ass end of the galaxy, without so much as body armor or a mortar shell between us. The jukebox finished up, and nobody walked over to feed it dollar coins. Some things never change. Just like in the war, the quiet was the worst. I've seen soldiers jump out of their foxholes and charge tanks just to shake the damn quiet, and I wondered how far someone in this bar was from doing the same. Rank? Privileges? Bullshit. But I'm still the one that spoke up. All right, folks, let's take this easy. That was to the crowd. Then, to the kid relative of the critters that had tried to kill me for 10 years of my life. Can I help you? The Alotan stayed quiet. I tried again. What can we do for you, Alotan? When I said Alotan, 4 of the bug's 6 limbs flicked up and back down lightning fast. They tucked in against its chitinous torso with a crack, just as the lower limbs slammed together. It was a peaceful gesture, downright friendly-like, in fact. Unfortunately for the locals, it sounded like a hiccup of small arms fire, and looked a lot like a praying mantis ready for a light snack. The bar was empty in 6 seconds. Everyone stampeded down the gravel road towards the parking lot or the highway beyond. Even Eddie lit out, leaving his precious watering hole for us to defend. I kept my good eye on the Alotan as the dust settled, and strained the lazy one. Sometimes I wished they'd left the cybernetic one in, headaches and all, across the table to my drinking buddies. Benefit of a sliced-up brain, I could watch the hockey game and the cards in my hand at the same time. Teddy was back to a healthy lime color, and Gris was flexible again, although still crouched for fight or flight in the human-sized chair. The bug was male. You could tell by the darker blue of the exoskeleton over his privates, visible as he swept aside the chair we'd been keeping for Dru and settled on the ground in its place. When he was settled, he brought the closest, smallest of his arms over the table and folded the 3 fine digits on each clawed hand together. I watched the 3rd finger twitch nervously atop the pincer grip of the other 2. I used to have a t-shirt showing that gesture on the front and a human hand giving a finger on the back, and that pretty much summed up how most vets felt about Alotans. The eggheads had decoded the bug's gesture to be ceremonial. This bug wanted to parley. I'd seen the gesture in black market vids of a bug prisoner being tested by gleeful medtechs, so maybe bugs used it to beg for mercy too or something. After Callahan bought it behind a wall of smoke, maybe under claws just like that, I liked watching what those medtechs did to bugs. A lot. I saw that all Teddy's eyes were watching the bug's claws. Humans had a 50-50 chance of surviving the poison they dripped, but his cold-blooded Kaiben physiology wouldn't have a chance in hell. I knew he could smell the tang of it, and I kicked at one of his tails. Not exactly subtle, but I got his eye in time for him to catch me smile, and return the ceremonial gesture to the bug as best I could. Here is the church, and here is the steeple. Reluctantly, my drinking buddies did the same as best they were equipped. After that, the bug was supposed to tell us what the hell it wanted. The bug's chest rumbled as he pitched his voice for human ears. My name is Thomas Callahan. I remember feeling something snap inside. Then I flung the table away, clawing for its eyes. My dreams are always mixed up, but the poison and the booze in my system made this one a real wild ride. It started with me and the lieutenant sharing a canteen and laughing at some old joke. He was the LT, the man who kept us alive through hell when we could barely stop from screaming out loud for our mothers. The man who got us scrambling to jump back into hell on too little sleep too soon after escaping the worst. Blonde and bronzed by alien suns, clear-eyed and smiling through all kinds of crap by force of will alone. Then my dream universe changed, and I was back in the Wildlife Tavern, shouting and kicking at Callahan, while he sunk to the floor and cowered under my blows, which went on and on and on, until Gris jumped on my back, punching and swearing at me, until I backed off, my head spinning weirdly. Then, Dream Callahan became a real bug cowering on the tavern floor, that was somehow bleeding red, and I just knew it was Callahan's blood. Until I looked down and saw the gash in my shoe, where I'd sliced myself on the Alotan's toxin-coated spikes. Even as my sleeping brain put 2 and 2 together, I could still hear the LT's cries, and I still wanted to rip the blue bastard's armor open, to dig in its guts for Callahan, as if I could pull him free from the grave. I came the rest of the way awake when my fingers shook loose of the toilet bowl, I yanked myself upright before my head collided with the cool ceramic, took a few heaving breaths, and spat to clear the last of the bile in my mouth. I got up, slowly, and was splashing my face when Gris padded into the doorway. "That's right. Dump all that booze and poison. You can't die until you're done designing my next gym." He tossed me a damp towel, which I pressed to my forehead with a grateful nod while he cawed at me. Gris was my boss, kind of. Back in the war, we'd spent days, weeks sometimes, buttoned down in foxholes. And as a way of ignoring impending doom, we'd scratch up ways to adapt the gym equipment on our troop carriers for the Shelev form. After the war, he'd spent all his back pay to start an Earth-style fitness club on his homeworld. Turns out, millions of 3-foot-tall marshmallows loved working out in fancy silk suits and runners. At last count, he had a dozen gyms, and more money than I could count. Who'd have thought? I'd been an architect before the war, and afterwards Gris hired me on as his exclusive designer. I never had to leave the cottage or worry about roof repairs or drinking money again, which suited me fine. I only ever saw Sammy give it to an Alotan like that before, Jake. It looked impressive, up until you near kicked yourself to death. I wasn't in the mood for conversation yet, so I swung a leg over his doughy head and walked down the hall. Pays to stand 6 feet plus. I ignored the drooping wallpaper, shuffled around the little puddle from the water-stained ceiling and into the kitchen. Gris kept bugging me to fix that hall, saying a great architect shouldn't live in a dump. I've got a lot of experience walking over him to end conversations. Teddy was at the counter wearing my Kiss the Cook apron, standing on one of the 4-foot ladders he and Gris used when they visited, and peeling bacon from plastic wrap with his claws. Gris's yellow lab Millie sat at the base of the ladder, drooling and willing him to drop something with her eyes. "Tell me you washed first," I said. It hurt to talk, and my voice was gravelly in my throat. To repair some of the damage, I stepped out the side kitchen door to open the fridge on the screened-in porch, and saw it there, collapsed on top of a lawn chair down by the lake. Damn, I thought. It's really here. The bug was completely still. I wondered if I'd actually done some damage. Unarmed combat with an Alotan was a new stupid for me. I doubted I'd had any effect, but hoped it was hurting at least half as bad as I was. Teddy's voice was indignant behind me. Of course I washed my hands. He pitched his voice low. It followed us home from the tavern last night, and hasn't moved from there since. Millie whined. Scat, mammal. No bacon for you. I stared at the Alotan, its shell sparkling with light reflecting off the lake. As I reached inside the fridge for a can of tomato juice I kept stocked for mornings after less accidental poisonings. I had studied images of bugs showing weapons susceptibility back in basic training, and run into my fair share of bug-shaped scanner blips. Somehow staring at the thing sitting under a yellow sun, on my very own piece of lakefront, scared even more hell out of me. Just then Millie came clack-clacking out to the porch, sniffing and perking up her ears like she did when deer were raiding the vegetable garden. I snagged her collar before she started barking, just as the scruff rose on her back when she saw the interloper on her property. Down, girl, I murmured, and her barks mellowed into growls, her brown eyes intent on the blue thing on the lawn. Gris hopped out of the kitchen with a handful of doggy treats. Poor Millie. Hey, want to close that door, Jake? Millie's tail wagged fitfully, but alternated with a few growls before she let herself be bribed. The lab chomped through a couple of the treats on the kitchen floor as I closed the door, wondering again how Gris had ever managed to train a dog almost as tall as he was. She's going to get fat, you keep feeding her like that, I said. My eyes never left the yard. Better bought off and fat than territorial and dead, Gris cooed as he rubbed the lab's fur. I couldn't argue with his logic. A hunk of bacon plopped onto the kitchen floor, and Millie finally did knock over her alien master to get to it. Teddy had his back to us and was doing that weird almost whistle thing Kaiban can do that humans can barely hear. I grinned. The macho lizard didn't dislike the mutt as much as he let on. I looked back out at the bug. It was time to evaluate the situation and respond. Don't suppose one of you want to evict that thing for me? I looked over my shoulder. The kitchen was empty. I heard the dog whimper from the front room and rolled my eyes. Ah, yes, I thought to myself, once again the joys of rank. The rusty creak of the porch didn't get the Alotan moving. Neither did the noise I made picking up a shovel, before walking down to the deck chairs in front of the scrawny patch of sand I charitably called a beach. I hefted the shovel like a baseball bat before I was inside the bug's reach, and my head started throbbing in Technicolor to remind me I didn't like the poison on those claws. I stopped behind it, debating whether or not to just start hammering away. Instead, I blew a breath up at the long hair in front of my eyes and relaxed the shovel against my shoulder. Look, Bug, I figure I can't likely beat you dead before you scratch me, and I'd just as soon not have to empty myself of claw scratch again when we're done. So what say you just stand up and get the hell off my property? Antenna wriggled behind eye stalks all over its head. It kept on staring at the soft waves slapping at my narrow dock and scrawny beach. More silence was all I got from it. I had the willies, sure, but I was sick and tired more than scared. I sighed, lowered the shovel, and scratched at the back of my neck. It had been months since I'd gotten closer to town than the Wildlife Tavern. Maybe Teddy could give me a trim later. Oh, what the hell, I grumbled, circled around in front of the bug, and plunked down in the other chair. I settled down with the shovel over my lap, just in case. Even this close, and man, I was close, I could still only make out just a couple battle scars. What's more, they were all on its arm, not its body. They looked purely defensive, but that was unlikely. One of the first things we learned about his kind was that damage earned a bug respect, and clean shell earned the reverse. Still, I mulled over my one-sided attack at the bar the night before, and wondered what self-respecting bug showed that kind of restraint. From inside, Millie barked, and the Alotan swung an eye stalk back. I looked back too, and saw Teeny, Shelev, and Kai-Ben hands yank the dog out of the window, leaving only swishing curtains. Callahan and Thomas are my names, it trilled. I knew they could speak. Scientists had been getting sounds out of bug corpses since back when I was ground-pounding. Still, it was disturbing to hear soft, musical words come out of that mouth. He who came before gave them to me when no one else would. My knuckles whitened around the shovel. Only a bone-deep ache kept me from trying to jam it in a pot and boil it alive, just to listen to it scream in that pretty voice. "He did he?" I asked, hearing my voice crack. "Want to tell me how the hell a dead man gave you anything?" "It was his death's gift, yes." I could feel comforting hate building in me again. "So how do you know the LT?" I only asked the question for a good reason to start wailing on that thick blue shell again. I'd go for the soft bits under the eyes. "I worked afield with the Tom you knew, Master Sergeant Behringer. He shared his brew and his tales, and I shared my shelter. And I shared my shelter. And together we swam a hard length of life's river. I am here because he would be. Tom that wanted you to know of his last days, Master Sarge." The squeal of hinges cut him off, and then Millie was snarling and leaping off the steps. Gris fell out of the door behind her, wailing for her to stop. I tried to jump from the chair as she galloped straight for us, but my shovel caught in the arm of the chair. A sick feeling spread through my guts as I struggled to free myself and watched that beautiful yellow lab race right for the bug. I watched it flow out of the chair onto the ground, its upper legs reaching towards the dog, poison claws retracted. I know because I couldn't take my eyes off them until Millie had chewed up enough grass with her paws to stop herself, suspicious and now just out of reach. "Come on, girl," the bug called out in its pretty voice. Millie's growl changed in mid-sound to a curious snort, and her tongue stuck out the side of her mouth. She inched forward, sniffing with doggy curiosity. Gris was still tumbling down the stairs, bleeding wordless fear when his beloved companion made up her mind and trotted forward into the bug's reach. Before Gris could get to us, sweating and gasping. He owned the gyms, he didn't work out in them. Millie was on her back, chewing happily on the thing's opposable digits as it rubbed her belly. Without taking my eyes off Millie and the bug hovering over her, I backed over to Gris, struck dumb and a shovel still in hand. Gris was terrified and starting to stink up again, but I'll be damned if he didn't duck under those claws to grab his dog's collar and yank her away. Millie yelped as surprised as I was by the move, but she let him pull her up the hill and tie her to a rusty chain that hardly ever saw use. The bug stayed close to the ground and watched them go. "I love dogs, Master Sergeant. My family raises German shepherds." I gripped the shovel with two shaking hands again. "Bullshit. What are you... Just shut the hell up." The one that was nameless had never seen a dog, yes, but Callahans have always kept dogs. "Nothing as surefire dreary," he began. "As a house without a dog in it," I whispered in return, my anger replaced with shock. "Tom used to say that." It sighed. "Yes, I did." "No, Callahan did," I snarled, slashing the shovel again. It got the hint and went quiet. Did I have a crazy bug on my hands? One second the bug was talking about Callahan. The next he thought he was Callahan? I turned on Gris. "What the hell are you doing out here? Millie could have been killed." The little guy was trying hard to hold it together. That dog was closer to him than us or his kin. His blinking eyes looked up at me. "I didn't mean for her to get out. She just bolted." "Look, I appreciate the support," I said, "but why don't you just head back inside?" The big eyes blinked again. "What support?" His eyes grew so big they filled his glass lenses. "No, I came out here because Eddie just called up from the bar. We've got a real problem." Gris barely got the words out before things went hairy. All us vets have the same mess of micron-thin wires marbled through our brains. They triggered sensation when a couple dozen kinds of passive military scans painted us, and we all felt it the same way, like someone dunked the back of our heads in a bucket full of freezing cold water. Right after it hit me, the bug fell forward on its face, its right front limb gone, evaporated in a gory mist. Millie started barking like crazy, and Gris threw himself flat on the ground. Nothing and nobody can do more than duck and cover when something targets them from close enough to set their head screaming. I knew that, so I'm still not sure why I did what I did next. I credit fast thinking for getting me out of the war alive, but it's more the reverse. My instincts take over, and they seem to know what they're doing. Before my brain had even processed what happened to the bug's arm, I was swinging the shovel, catching it square in the side of its head. Be lying if I said it didn't feel good hitting it that hard. Bugs are tough, and it takes a lot to put one down. But I put my body behind that swing, and it rolled a couple of times before it stopped. You've got to splatter a lot of brain before an Alotan stops moving, and no matter how much damage you do to its body, the thing can move like it doesn't even know it's dead. This one jumped back to its feet after it stopped rolling, and stared dumbly at what used to be its arm. I threw the shovel to wake it up. The bug caught it, and I heard that wet gurgling sound start up, the one I'd had nightmares about since the war, as it snapped the shovel in two like a dry twig. "Run!" I said. All its eye stalks whipped my way. Birds took off on the lake, and my hoarse shout echoed over the water. The bug didn't run, and that probably saved its life. It turned and charged underwater, throwing up a churning white wave and putting me in between it and the line of fire. I turned around slow, hands open wide to show the shooter they were empty, and scanned the trees around the cottage. Next to a couple squad cars looking for a certain moonshiner still, there wasn't anything I knew of anywhere near Ladysmith that could set off my scans. I found what I was looking for, perched on the silver chimney pipe the guys had installed for me last year. He wore gray and white overalls, elastic but stretched almost to breaking, with thick tentacles, filling holes meant for arms and legs. Some of the limbs were gleaming, artificial. The rest had a yellow and black pattern. His big reptilian head, jaw wide and drooling, weaved the way his ancestors and human snakes did to hypnotize prey before a kill. There was no snake's tongue whipping over those sharp fangs. Instead, a rattle poured out past sharp, glassy fangs. Then the figure dropped from its perch to fall out of sight on the far side of the cottage. Dru had made it to the reunion after all. Stay tuned for Part 2 of Last Man Home, or visit servingworlds.com for other stories or to buy the ebook.